The year was one of uncertainty. Across Africa, the struggle against malaria continued, like a battle that had been fought for generations. Millions of lives had been lost, families torn apart, children taken too soon. In the middle of this pain, a bold announcement was made by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They had a plan, a powerful plan, a scientific project designed to fight malaria not with medicine, not with bed nets, but with something far more experimental: genetically modified mosquitoes. For many in the West, it sounded like hope. But in the heart of Africa and Burkina Faso, it sounded like something else: questions, fears, doubts. And from those doubts rose a decision that would shock the world. Burkina Faso blocked Bill Gates' malaria plan. The malaria plan was introduced with grand promises. Malaria kills nearly 500,000 people every year, most of them in Africa. Scientists believed that by releasing genetically modified mosquitoes into the wild, they could reduce the population of malaria-carrying species. The message was clear: this is the future. This is the solution Africa needs. Bill Gates himself had spoken for years about malaria. His foundation poured billions into research. To many in the West, this was philanthropy at its finest, the wealth of one of the richest men on earth directed toward saving lives. But Africa asked a different question: at what cost? Burkina Faso was chosen as one of the testing grounds. In 2019, researchers released a batch of genetically modified mosquitoes into a village in the country's southwest. The goal, they said, was simple: test how these insects survived, behaved, and reproduced. For the scientific community, it was a controlled, small-scale test. But for the villagers, it was something far greater: an intrusion into their land, their environment, and their lives. Some asked, who gave permission? Who decided that our skies should become laboratories? That question spread across the nation. Soon, it was no longer about mosquitoes. It was about sovereignty. To understand why Burkina Faso resisted, one must understand Africa's history. For centuries, the continent had been treated as a testing ground. From colonial medical experiments to modern-day pharmaceutical trials, Africans often found themselves as subjects, not decision-makers. The genetically modified mosquito project triggered that old wound. People remembered stories their grandparents told about forced experiments, about medicines given without explanation, about outsiders deciding what was good for Africa. So when this new malaria plan arrived, many saw not salvation, but a continuation of that same pattern. Across Burkina Faso, protests began to rise. Activists spoke out. Journalists raised questions. Religious leaders and village elders gathered to ask, who controls our future? In markets, in mosques, in community halls. One phrase echoed louder than any scientific explanation: Africa is not a laboratory. The government was forced to listen. Burkina Faso had to make a decision that went beyond science, a decision about dignity. The turning point: sovereignty versus dependency. This was not only about mosquitoes. It was about power. The malaria project, though presented as humanitarian, also highlighted a painful reality. Africa's fight against disease was too often funded and designed by outsiders. The risk was clear: if we cannot control our own health systems, can we ever be free? Burkina Faso's leaders weighed the risks. If they accepted the project, they would gain access to cutting-edge research. If they rejected it, they would send a powerful message: Africa must chart its own path. And so, after years of debate, skepticism, and resistance, Burkina Faso said no. Bill Gates' vision versus Burkina Faso's stand. Let's be clear: Bill Gates' vision was not born of malice. His foundation truly believed in fighting malaria with every tool possible. For them, genetically modified mosquitoes were a frontier of science that could save millions. But Burkina Faso's refusal was equally not born of ignorance. It was born of caution, of history, of a desire to protect their land, their people, their environment. Two worlds collided here: the world of global philanthropy, with its billions of dollars and bold ideas; the world of African sovereignty, with its scars of colonization and its longing for independence. The clash was not about science alone. It was about who decides Africa's future. Burkina Faso's decision reverberated far beyond its borders. It became a symbol. In Ghana, Nigeria, and Uganda, activists began to speak louder about similar projects. Across Africa, Governments started asking tougher questions when foreign institutions arrived with grand experiments. For decades, Africa had been told to be grateful for aid, for donations, for interventions. But now, one small nation had shown the courage to say, gratitude cannot replace sovereignty. The story did not end with Burkina Faso blocking the Malaria plan. Instead, it sparked a wider awakening. Pan-African thinkers and leaders began using this case as an example in speeches, conferences, and community debates. They argued, if we can resist external experiments, we can also resist unfair economic policies. If we can demand sovereignty in science, we can demand sovereignty in trade, in finance, in culture. The fight over mosquitoes had transformed into a fight over identity. Of course, malaria remains a deadly enemy. Burkina Faso's rejection did not end the fight, but it did reshape the battlefield. Instead of depending only on foreign foundations, African scientists began calling for homegrown solutions. Universities pushed for more funding. Local researchers asked for the chance to lead trials, not just host them. The dream became clear. An Africa where the fight against malaria is led by Africans, for Africans. And while Bill Gates' plan was blocked, his vision of eradicating malaria remains alive. The difference is, Africa now insists if we are to solve this, we must be equal partners, not silent subjects. In the end, the story of Burkina Faso blocking Bill Gates' malaria plan is not a story of science lost. It is a story of dignity gained. It is about a nation that looked at the world's most powerful philanthropist and said, we respect your vision, but we will decide our destiny. It is about a continent that remembers its history and refuses to repeat it. It is about sovereignty, not just political sovereignty, but scientific sovereignty. And as Africa rises, this decision will be remembered not as a rejection of progress, but as a declaration of independence. Burkina Faso's skies remain filled with mosquitoes. The battle against malaria continues. But those same skies now carry something else. That Africa is no longer a laboratory. That Africa is no longer silent. That Africa is no longer waiting for permission to protect its people. And so, in the heart of the Sahel, a new chapter is written where even the smallest insect becomes a symbol of the greatest struggle, the struggle for freedom. What does stability really mean? Who truly serves Africa? And in the answers to those questions, a new Africa may be born. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the untold stories, shaping Africa's future by African lights.